The period between the mid-17th and early 19th centuries was a historical turning point known as the Age of Reason and Revolutions. It was a two-step process. First, the Enlightenment generated radical new ideas about human nature and government. Then, the political revolutions in America, France, and Latin America took those ideas and violently applied them, tearing down old structures of absolute power and establishing the foundation for modern democracy. The Enlightenment was an intellectual movement that swept through Europe in the 18th century. Thinkers decided to apply the rules of science to society itself. They argued that reason and logic could be used to solve all human problems, not just scientific ones, but problems of government, religion, and social order. They rejected the old medieval idea that kings ruled by divine right and superstition, demanding evidence and logic instead. The groundwork for the Enlightenment was laid by the scientific revolution. Scientists like Isaac Newton had demonstrated that the physical universe, from planets to apples, operated according to fixed, predictable natural laws. Enlightenment philosophers realized that if there were natural laws governing physics, perhaps there were also natural laws that should govern human behavior and society. They set out to find the perfect, rational form of government. One of the first major thinkers was the English philosopher Thomas Hobbes. Living through the English Civil War, he concluded that humans are naturally selfish and wicked. In his book, Leviathan, he argued that to avoid chaos and constant warfare, people must enter into a social contract, giving up virtually all their rights to one strong absolute ruler. For Hobbes, a powerful government was the only way to ensure law and order. Another English philosopher, John Locke, took a much more optimistic view. He argued that people were born with natural, inalienable rights: life, liberty, and property. Locke believed the sole purpose of government was to protect these rights. Critically, he argued that if a government fails to protect its citizens' rights, the people have a right, and perhaps an obligation, to overthrow that government. This idea became the core philosophy of future revolutions. The French philosopher Montesquieu was concerned about how to prevent any single ruler or group from becoming tyrannical. He proposed the solution of separation of powers, dividing governmental authority into three distinct separate branches. The legislative makes laws, executive enforces laws, and judicial interprets laws. This system of checks and balances ensures that no single branch can become too powerful. The French-Swiss philosopher Jean-Jacques Rousseau focused on freedom and direct rule. He believed that the only legitimate government was one freely formed by the people. His version of the social contract argued that government should be guided by the general will, meaning what is best for the entire community, even if it contradicts a few individual desires. Rousseau's ideas provided the theoretical basis for popular sovereignty and direct democracy. Perhaps the most passionate and influential voice was Voltaire. This French writer used satire and wit to attack intolerance, superstition, and the authority of the Church. His greatest legacy is his unwavering defense of fundamental freedoms: freedom of speech, freedom of the press, and freedom of religious belief. He constantly reminded people that reason and tolerance were humanity's best defenses against tyranny. The power of Enlightenment ideas was so strong that even some monarchs began to adopt them. These rulers were known as enlightened despots, absolute rulers. Figures like Catherine the Great of Russia and Frederick the Great of Prussia implemented reforms like religious tolerance, improved education, and modernized legal systems. However, they only went so far. They never gave up their absolute power, ensuring the reforms always benefited the state and their personal authority. The first true test of Enlightenment ideas came with the American Revolution. The British colonies protested being taxed without having representatives in the British Parliament, the core of taxation without representation. When hostilities began, Thomas Jefferson drafted the Declaration of Independence in 1776, directly citing John Locke's ideas to justify throwing off the oppressive British government and establishing a republic based on natural rights. After the war, the American founders set out to build a new government based on the rational principles they had inherited. The U.S. Constitution is the ultimate Enlightenment blueprint. It meticulously established Montesquieu's separation of powers with its three branches. It also integrated Locke's natural rights and Rousseau's concept of popular sovereignty, that the authority of the state is created and sustained by the consent of its people. Just as the U.S. was establishing its republic, France was collapsing. The French Revolution was fueled by three core problems: a rigid, deeply unfair social structure, where the nobility and clergy paid almost no taxes; the financial extravagance of the monarchy, Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette; and a crippling economic crisis driven by debt and poor harvests. The unfairness, highlighted by Enlightenment ideas, became intolerable for the poor majority, known as the Third Estate. A revolution began on July 14, 1789, with the symbolic storming of the Bastille, a royal prison. The revolutionaries quickly issued the Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen, which echoed Locke by proclaiming that men are born and remain free and equal in rights. It was a bold declaration that tore up the old social order, paving the way for the total overthrow of the French monarchy. The revolution soon took a dark, terrifying turn. In 1793, the radical leader Maximilien Robespierre began the Reign of Terror. His goal was to wipe out any trace of France's old royalist past and eliminate all enemies of the revolution. Thousands of people, from nobles to common citizens, were quickly convicted and publicly executed by the guillotine. The terror demonstrated the bloody, unstable, and dangerous side of revolutionary zeal. The chaos of the French Revolution eventually exhausted the nation, creating a vacuum that was filled by a brilliant military leader, Napoleon Bonaparte. In 1799, he staged a coup d'etat and later crowned himself emperor. While he ended the Republic, he was a child of the Revolution, establishing a unified law code, Napoleonic Code, that institutionalized many of the Enlightenment's key principles and spread them across Europe through his conquests. Across the Atlantic, the events in France inspired a far more radical movement, the Haitian Revolution. The enslaved people of the French colony of Saint-Domingue, inspired by the French Declaration of the Rights of Man, revolted against their French masters. Led by the brilliant former slave Toussaint Louverture, they fought for over a decade, ultimately defeating Napoleon's armies. In 1804, they established Haiti as the first free black republic and the only nation founded by a successful slave rebellion. The French and Haitian revolutions then spurred similar uprisings across Latin America. The Creoles, Spaniards born in the colonies, resented the power of the Peninsulares, Spaniards born in Spain. When Napoleon invaded Spain, the authority of the Spanish crown weakened, providing the perfect opportunity for the Creoles to seize power, using Enlightenment ideals of self-rule and liberty to justify their drive for independence. The greatest figure of this movement was the wealthy Creole general Simón Bolívar. Known as the Liberator, he led armies that defeated the Spanish in battle after battle, securing independence for an immense territory that included modern-day Venezuela, Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, and Bolivia. Bolívar dreamed of creating a united republican state across South America, a dream that, though ultimately unfulfilled, cemented his place as a monumental historical figure. The revolutions of this era left a permanent mark. They successfully spread the idea of popular sovereignty, that the ultimate power resides in the people, which replaced the concept of divine right monarchy. These revolutions also provided a template for all future social and political movements, directly inspiring movements for the abolition of slavery and the fight for women's rights across the world. The core ideas birthed in the Enlightenment, natural rights, freedom of speech, and the separation of powers, are not just historical artifacts. They form the bedrock of almost every modern democratic constitution. From the U.S. Bill of Rights to the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights, the principles developed by Locke, Montesquieu, and Voltaire remain the standard against which we measure all governments. The age of reason and revolutions is truly the beginning of our political modern age.